Yep.
Good morning. I now declare the Black Creek Oyster Bay Service Committee meeting for Monday, May 8th, 2023 to be in session. And a big hello to all those people out in Cyberland watching this in their pajamas, having their toast and peanut butter. This is the committee of the CBRD, and all decisions made here are referred back so far to the Comox Valley Region Districts, usually at the last meeting of the month. I'd like to also acknowledge that we are seated here on the unceded traditional territory of our very own Comox First Nation peoples. We don't have too many in the gallery, so if we have an emergency, we do have exits, two on the south side of the building, and then through the doors, there's two more in the hall. And the muster point is in the parking lot, should we need to exit the building. Washrooms are at the back, through the hall and on your right. That being said, housekeeping items over. We're going to plunge right in. Very exciting meeting this morning. Number one is our Fire and Rescue Service Agreement Mutual Aid. There's a report for receipt. And seconded and over to CAO, acting CAO, James Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, directors. Pleased to introduce Bruce Green, Regional Rural Fire Chief, who will introduce this staff report and I believe the next two as well. So Bruce is online, and turn it over to Bruce.
Good morning, Bruce.
I think you're still muted, Bruce. There we go.
There we go. Thank you, James, and through the chair to the director. Yeah, the first one I want to report on is the Fire Services Mutual Aid Agreement. We currently have a mutual aid agreement with all the fire departments in the Comox Valley, and that agreement is ending actually today as we speak, but there is a clause in there to renew it from month to month. Currently, all the fire chiefs are going to their respective councils to ask for a further 5 years, which is why I'm here today. And there is a clause in this that if we so choose that we can ask for a fee for our services to this date. There's never been that happen. So with that, I'm just asking for the board to authorize us to extend the agreement for another 5 years.
5 more years. Heard that one before. Thank you very much, Chief. Any questions? No. John seems to be good from Area D. I have one. Our original mutual aid also included CFB Comox. Is that just sort of a tacit accepted one, or they don't have to go to their council? Obviously, they have to go to the federal government.
So we do have a separate memorandum of understanding with 19 Wing Comox. That one is due to expire here shortly, and 19 Wing will be leading that one. So I will be coming back to the board when 19 Wing comes and ask for the blessing for that one to be extended as well.
That makes sense. Thank you so much. Well, we're on receipt. I don't see any questions. Call a question on receipt. All in favor? Then that carries. We have a recommendation attached, and we can move that.
Move recommendation.
And I'll second that. Any discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, I'll call a question on that. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Number 2, Fire Department Operational Guidelines, report from April 12th regarding the annual updates to the Comox Valley Region District Fire Service Operational Guideline Manual for receipt.
Move receipt.
And I'll second it. And back over to Chief Green.
Thank you, Chair, and to the director. Yeah, in 2020, we hired a consultant to create an operational guideline package for all the Comox Valley Regional District fire departments. And one of the reports there was that we should come to the board on an annual basis and get past any updated operational guidelines or changes to current operational guidelines. And in this package, we have 7 that have to be, or 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that have to be renewed. Fanny Bay is one on attendance and practice. Fanny Bay is a first responder report response. Hornby is wait for police. And Oyster River is driver requirements updates. And our response plan, because we're now doing Merville, and that we added all the Merville engines into our response plans. With that, I ask for your guys' approval to adopt these as presented.
Okay, any questions from the directors? Director John.
Nope, no questions. Thank you.
Okay. Then we don't have any questions on this side, so I will call a question on receipt. All those in favor of receipt? And that carries, and there is also recommendation attached to number 2. Sorry.
Move recommendation.
Moved and seconded.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Then on the recommendation, all those in favor? That also carries. Number 3, fire service review report from May 5th. That's very recent, regarding a recently completed fire service review for receipt. I'll move it if John wants to second it.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so
Bruce.
back over to Bruce. You're on again, Bruce.
Thank you, Chair, and through the director. In 2012, we had hired a consultant to do an administrative review of the fire department, and within that review, there was countless recommendations that staff had worked through, and it now basically complete all those recommendations. With the pending Fire Safety Act and the new provincial minimum training standard for firefighters, and the inclusion of Union Bay into the regional district fire services, staff thought it would be a good idea to do another overall review of the fire service. And in June of 2022, we hired Tim Ply and Associates to do a review. And that review was completed and submitted in June 23rd. And today I would like to introduce Tim Ply from Tim Ply and Associates to give an overview of the review that was completed by his company.
Tim, step right up to the microphone. There you go. The pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you, Chief Green, for that introduction. He actually moves me to slide 2 already. So as Chief Green mentioned, in 2022, we were retained to undertake a fire services review for the CVRD. Our report, as the Chief mentioned, was submitted in January. I'll just be a little bit while I advance my notes here. So in terms of, well, as the Chief mentioned, in 2012, and some of you may recall that the CVRD undertook a governance review of your fire services. Like a lot of regional districts, you have a very diverse and complicated matrix of service areas and fire departments. And commendably, in 2012, the CVRD undertook a review of that aspect, and we're given a list of findings or recommendations which you have acted on. The CVRD has acted on diligently since then. And so the scope of work involved reviewing the recommendations from that report and the progress made on those. The CVRD asked us to review the recent changes that have happened in the fire services sector and to summarize any changes that are anticipated. And the Chief mentioned a Fire Safety Act that is considered to be pending. And we were asked to consider those factors in our review. The CVRD asked us as well to review best practices in other regional areas, regional district jurisdictions. And lastly, the CVRD asked us to make recommendations or to report findings that would help with the governance and provision of fire protective services over the next 5 to 10 years. So as part of our review, we reviewed a wide range of documents. We met in communities with fire chiefs and society representatives. We met with some CVRD staff. We undertook a benchmark survey of other regional districts. And we met with fire chiefs from neighboring departments, and that would include Comox, Cumberland, Courtenay, Campbell River, and Ships Point. We also met with members of the Improvement District Board at Ships Point. And we found that the current state in 2022 included the recommendations from the 2012 report had been largely completed. There were a couple that had not been addressed and a couple that had been looked at and maybe not implemented, but very well implemented. And there was some heavy lifting there, I can tell you. The CVRD we found has done a very good job of being proactive in managing their fire departments, despite, as I mentioned, a very complex array of fire protection service areas and service delivery models. There was, in 2022, mid-year, the retirement of a long-serving manager of fire services, and that presented some questions and some opportunities about the path forward. And the timing was right, 10 years after the 2012 report, for a new set of recommendations to set a path forward. So that was the current state that we found. In terms of risks or vulnerabilities that we encountered, there are a number of, some things have happened, some things we think are about to happen. In 2014, the province adopted a minimum training standard, a revised, very changed minimum training standard that applies to local governments. And the way it works is the Office of the Fire Commissioner provincially sets training standards, and local governments respond to that. And the province adopted a 3-tiered training standard. And importantly in that, the province directed that local governments would have to choose one of 3 levels of service, implement that by act of the board or council, and ensure that firefighters are trained accordingly. So it very, very much papered local governments to say you are responsible for fire services and adequate training. That was in 2014, and there's been 2 revisions of that standard since. Tied somewhat to that minimum training standard change is the requirement to keep records, to have thoroughly documented training and all manner of equipment and apparatus maintenance as well. The records management requirement on fire departments has grown, I would say, exponentially since I started my career in the fire service. What we see pending is, as Chief Green mentioned, a Fire Safety Act that is expected to be introduced this year, and possibly with regulations following. And also an Emergency Program Act, as you're aware, that is expected to be introduced later this year with regulations following in the following year. The Fire Safety Act may impose the obligation on regional districts to conduct fire inspections, as municipalities are currently required to do. And it may also require that regional districts undertake investigations to determine the cause of fires, where currently the province bears the responsibility for that, and locally we act for the province. So those 2 aspects might land on regional districts. It's not clear yet if they will, or how much support the province would give to local governments, regional governments for that. The Emergency Program Act will certainly change the way local governments approach emergency management, and that will have some spillover effect into your fire services. Whether you agree with climate change or not, nobody can argue with the fact that the nature of wildfire is changing. And just have to watch the news lately to see what's happening. Fire season in the north already. Wildfires are more volatile, they're more common, and they're impacting urban interface neighborhoods. And the province is so committed to getting ahead of the wildfire risk that is growing that they've started to fund a Fire Smart program. And there's very good funding opportunities to implement Fire Smart programs to ready local governments and communities for that change. And societally, there's some changes that are impacting the way fire services are delivered. People aren't volunteering like they used to, or for the same reasons like they used to. And as you rely on paid on-call firefighters, and as society changes, the reason that people will come and be active for you as firefighters are changing. And as local governments, we need to change our methods so that we're ensuring that we can attract paid on-call firefighters. The alternative is very expensive, as you can imagine. So there's some opportunities available to you, and they may not seem like opportunities, but they are opportunities in the face of those risks or vulnerabilities. And the first of which is centralization of administrative services. The CVRD has done a very good job of centralizing the governance and very clearly identifying their role as the authority having jurisdiction over fire services in the regional district. And you can use that strong governance model to centralize the administrative services, be it record keeping, training, fleet maintenance, and records management of that, record management in general. They can be centralized from your regional government in support of those fire departments to make sure that your departments are meeting the obligations that fall on the regional district, and to ensure that you're supporting as best you can that paid on-call firefighter model. There's an opportunity for enhanced coordination within fire and within the CVRD organization. In our interviews, we found that there was opportunity for improved communication between fire and emergency management, between fire and planning and development, and having a manager of fire services working from this building best gives you that opportunity. So there's an opportunity to enhance or improve the coordination and communication there, and also between fire departments. And Chief Green spoke about mutual aid. That's a great tool that you have, and you can build on that and enhance that. And again, being centralized under one manager enables you to do that. And lastly, thoughtful implementation of consolidation. As you will be well aware, folks in their neighborhoods and that are centralized or supported by a fire department are very attached to their fire departments and their autonomy, and they don't easily come to consideration of consolidation of services, but there are economies of scale in providing a service like fire protection. And if you continue on the path that we see you on, to be thoughtful in your consideration and implementation of consolidation, we think there's good opportunity there. We wanted to show you this slide, not because it really lends to the scope of work from our report, but it's a bit of it's a good snapshot to show you your fire departments and some data around those calls for service. And those are averaged over 5 years, 2017 to 2021, I believe, and annualized, and number of households served by each department, and the property tax requisition rate. And you can see that call volume is relatively low in many of your departments, 200 or less. It calls for service per year, except Oyster River, and at 431, and that includes the Oyster River Fire Hall and Merville. At 431, averaged over 5 years, it's beginning to creep up into the zone where sometimes we see calls for service or call volume challenge the paid on call model. So there's steps that the CVRD can take to address or mitigate that, but it's something that the CVRD will want to have their eye on, the growing calls for service in that area. And staying with Oyster River, and it's likely the department that's of interest to this committee, you can see 3,684 households served. So a very broad tax base and and constituent base, and that likely results in the lowest cost per service of 45 cents per $1,000 assessed value. As I said earlier, there is an economy of scale to services like this, and the Oyster River Fire Department demonstrates that very nicely. And our last slide, this may not be as readily visible off the screen as it is on a page. It looks a little daunting. This is the potential organization chart over the next 5 to 10 years for CVRD, Fire Services Administration. All of the boxes in blue are existing positions. So those already exist. You already have those positions. You have a manager of fire services. You have fire chiefs in 5 departments right now. And this is showing a potential for in the south to consolidate both Union Bay and Fanny Bay under one fire chief. So it's projecting actually a potential reduction in the number of fire chiefs over the next 5 to 10 years. And I'd just like to walk you really quickly through the grade boxes. So one is that potential consolidation of fire chief position in the south. Another is administrative assistant. You currently provide a half-time equivalent administrative assistant to fire services. So that is a full-time position, I understand, that is shared with emergency management. And it may come that as the centralizing of services grows and the workload centrally grows, that you will look to increase that administrative assistant position to full-time rather than half-time. And that is something that the CVRD should have their eye on. Also below, there's a box for fire prevention officer. If the Fire Safety Act is introduced and if it imposes obligations on regional government, you'll need to respond to those obligations. And at this point, we don't know if the province is going to assist with those services, inspection services, or not. We understand that it's likely that you'll be able to recover costs for those inspection services, but in any event, you may want to internalize that inspection service over a region-wide service area under one employee who is professional at fire inspections. So that is another item to have your eye on. The CVRD will have options. They could put that work into a different department. They could contract it out likely. There will be options, but one thing you should consider is the value of bringing that in centrally, depending on what the Fire Services Act looks like. And lastly, I can't read it from here. Apologize. Oh, it's the Fire Smart Coordinator. As I mentioned earlier, there's ample funding available from the province, and it appears the province is going to remain committed to this program. And you already have fire service or Fire Smart liaisons or ambassadors in each of your departments. And what has been absent is a coordinating function at the regional district. At least it was not in place last year when we looked at the situation. And some other regional districts have populated a Fire Smart coordinator position to coordinate those ambassadors in the field. And the funding to date, as we understand, has been year to year. And it looks as though, thank you. It looks as though the province will explore multi-year funding commitment for a position like that. So the CVRD, and I know Chief Green has his eye on this, the CVRD may want to explore centralizing a Fire Smart coordinator position in fire administration to coordinate those advocates in the field. And Mr. Chair, that is our presentation. We're very happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there's some questions.
To take it all in, one thing that I was interested in learning was how the new 911 services are going to affect fire departments, I guess, in 2025.
Mr. Chair, the implementation of enhanced 911 services was outside the scope of this review. We did meet with the acting fire chief in Campbell River as because they are a dispatch provider to your departments. And I suspect that Mr. Warren will probably be better positioned to speak to 911, given the position of the regional district than I am. But that was outside the scope of this.
I can very, very lightly touch on what my understanding is of the changes coming to the 911 services. And just to clarify, are you asking about the enhanced ability to call in for response, whether it be through cell phone or texting or other services? All of the above, yeah. So I don't have a lot of detail on what that effect will be, but in short, the ability to call in emergencies will be much greater, and a lot more information coming in to the dispatchers, and how that'll affect fire services. There's a great technological shift that'll be needed to collect all that data and be able to respond. The North Island 911 Corporation, which provides the coordinated dispatch across Comox Valley, Strathcona, portions of Nanaimo, Mount Waddington, and others, is gearing up to be able to accommodate and be able to respond to the new requirements that are coming down. I'd have to get a little bit more information to provide specifics beyond that.
The reason why I mentioned it is that, my understanding with my tech background is that it's going to require quite a GIS component. So GIS departments typically are small. They're quite busy. So I'm just wondering how all of those pieces fit.
Yeah, certainly the spatial mapping component of dispatch and receiving calls and being able to dispatch out then first responders is central to the whole system, and that's being looked at closely. The GIS department at the Comox Valley Regional District is the base for the North Island 911 service, and so we have staffing and we have some resources in place. But absolutely, we need to be sure that as that new technology comes on, we've got the resources to be able to respond. I think I'll probably leave it at that for now.
That's good. Thank you.
Thanks very much. You answered a few of my questions. Regarding fire inspection, I think this first came before UBCM back in 2015, and when Al Richmond was the president, and being he's a chair of Caribou District, he fought it tooth and nail.
He did.
And kicked it down the road this far, which is good. So right now, is the fire inspection responsibility of the provincial government?
Currently, municipalities are required to conduct fire inspections on a regular basis. Regional district governments do not have the same obligation. So my understanding is that there are not regular fire inspections outside of municipalities, unless there's some other trigger, whether it be insurance triggered or some other government permitting.
So, and you alluded to the fact that the province might be bringing some money to the table for the Fire Smart program.
Correct.
Are they bringing money to the table then to help regional districts with fire inspection?
That's not clear yet. So I think that's the $64,000 question. We've seen the province increase dramatically the staffing at the Office of the Fire Commissioner, and one consideration for that might be that they're positioning themselves to either train or directly conduct inspections in regional areas, but that has not been shared publicly yet what their plans are.
Well, pardon me for being a little cynical, but I'm a 15-year veteran of this job. And I've seen lots of unfunded directives in my period of time where the whatever it is kicked down the road to local government. Here, you must, you shall, you will, but we don't have any money. We're not a funding ministry. Sorry, So I'm a little bit skeptical about all that stuff and what drives it. But the other thing you touched on, and I've been singing this song at this table, and I'm also involved in a lot of volunteer stuff. The fact that volunteers are not stepping up, and it was not just COVID; it was before COVID this started happening. I know, we've got a different societal generation out there that doesn't see themselves as actually being plugged in, except for plugged into their their devices. I know that long time societies like Canada Day, July 1st, and the Comox Valley exhibition are down to a rump of members. I think the last meeting for the Comox Valley exhibition, 3 people turned up. So I don't think the public generally realizes that you only get out of your community what you put into it. Somebody else isn't going to pick this up. And even, I guess, you know, I understand that the stipends is a good thing, you know, that you get paid for on call, because it's not cheap. And even, you know, now with multi-gender fire departments, you know, they have to have childcare at the halls sometimes, things like that. So, you know, it's not an easy one. Even in our policy committees that we do here, we have to go out like twice to get enough people just to fill the quota for these policy committees, and you get the same faces, you know, so it's really not working anymore. They're going to have to find something else. So, you know, I fully understand when it comes to firefighting. I mean, that is a huge bloody commitment. Ample funding. Yeah, that's going to be the trick, to see what actually happens from the province, because my experience has been the province doesn't really see themselves as part of the local communities. They're above all that. It's like the tradesman war between the carpenter and the laborer, you know, like, I'll just leave all my sawdust, you pick it up. That's about it. The only other thing, and thank you very much for this incredibly comprehensive report. And I will say that we've come legions from where we were. I think at one point, the different departments were using different breathing apparatus. They're using even different hose couplings. They couldn't hook up to the other person's hoses. So, you know, there was a lot of room for improvement. And I see this consolidation as being a good thing. And whether or not we can work with the municipalities on fire inspection, it might be something we can broach in the future. But yeah, and that's just about it. But the big issue I see is the fact that we've lost James Bast, because James isn't going to be an easy one to replace, because as you probably know, there's a certain culture there and a certain touch you have to have. And he had it in spades. So it's not just a matter of being able to technically do the job, but you really have to have the bedside manner to go along with it. So I'll ask the CAO, are we going out then for request for that position?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. At this time, we're recommending that the board support some of the relevant findings from this review, and the recruitment of that manager of fire services position is not on the imminent list. It's not immediately being looked at. Bruce's role as the regional rural fire chief. I'm sorry, Bruce, I got your title wrong on that one.
Change it every day.
Bruce's role is looking to help in that coordinating piece with the departments, and still having a heavy involvement with Oyster, of course. So at this time, it's not a posting that we're looking to recruit for immediately, but certainly from the findings in this fire service review, there's a role there.
Well, as you probably know, we're getting lots of retired people moving here from the lower mainland, and I'm sure there's probably some expert that's been retired now for 2 years and wondering what the heck to do with the rest of his life. Maybe we'll be lucky. Okay, well, any other questions? Director Rice has no questions. I have no more questions. And I'd like to thank you so much for this really comprehensive report. And I will admit, I got tired around page 89. So I kind of skimmed the rest of it. But a lot of good stuff in there. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to the receipt of the report. There you go.
Yes. So I'll move the receipt.
Move and I'll second it.
I'll also move the recommendation.
We go vote on the one first. So on receipt first, all in favor? And now you move the recommendation. I'll second that. All in favor? Was there anything else you wanted to add? Okay. That moves us at this blistering pace on to number 4. which is the potential delegation of the board authority and amalgamation of Black Creek Oyster Bay Service Committee and the Electoral Areas Service Committee into one service committee. And we have none other than Jake Martins.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a check-in with the committee. We had discussed this matter back in February, and there were sort of two issues that had been outlined: the delegation of authority, board authority to the committee for the Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire Service and Water Service, and then somewhat aligned with that is the potential amalgamation of the Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee and the Electoral Area Services Committee. We are seeking feedback most pointedly, I suppose, around the first part, which is the delegation, as we are currently holding back on bringing forward this matter to the board, awaiting response from this committee on that. Should the committee wish to seek amalgamation in some form, that could take place in the near term or in the longer term. There is no immediacy to that matter. We're happy to respond or bring forward further information need be, but again, what we are hoping to gain today is some feedback from the committee in respect to at least the delegation of authority to this body.
So thank you. So in essence, this is just exploratory. It's a report for receipt, and staff are just looking to see what the general consensus is from this committee.
That's correct, Chair. Yeah, and if I can answer any questions to sort of clarify matters, I'm happy to do so. Yeah.
Okay, well, you have a question from the director for Area D.
Thank you, Chair. I've given this quite a bit of thought, and being new at this, I think I would like to keep things just as they are.
And keep the door open for a later time, once you get your feet under you and see how it works.
Mr. Chair, may I clarify just in regards to Director Rice's feedback and keeping things the way they are, meaning both that's relative to the continuation of the Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee and the current form of delegation, which there is none provided to this committee. And so all essentially recommendations provided by this committee would then need to be ratified as they are now with the board. Just want to make sure that I'm clear on that.
Yes, that I think that at this point in time, having this meeting separate just gives us time to actually, talk about things. Quite concerned that if you just wrap this meeting up into another meeting, that a lot of things won't get that actual attention. So yes, going forward, at least I don't see anticipating that I would like a change at this point in time.
So to be clear, Jake, then you're saying that we can't move ahead with the delegation of authority unless the Black Creek Oyster Bay is included?
So, Mr. Chair, I think what I'm hearing is that Director Rice is wanting to not see the amalgamation of the Black Creek Oyster Bay and Electoral Area Services Committee. That I think I'm clear on. The other option, or the other item that's available, is the delegation of authority to the Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee. So continuing on with this committee, you could still be provided delegation so that then your resolutions or the bulk of your resolutions do not then need to be ratified again at the board table. They could essentially be made at this table and be done with.
Okay.
So again, looking for feedback in that regard from the committee on that, because
so we can still have the delegated authority, the enhanced authority we're looking for. Okay, correct?
absolutely.
Okay. Anything else, Director?
We just need a resolution in that regard from the committee, if that's an interest of yours, to see that delegated authority provided, and then we can take that to the board and seek their support for that.
Do we want to craft something right here at this meeting?
Certainly can, and it doesn't need to be elaborate. Something to the effect of the board consider providing delegated authority for the services provided by the Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee.
And I think Lisa's busy typing it up as we speak. We have to receive it anyway first.
Maybe just for my clarity then, so the intent would be that the Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee continue on in its current form and meetings are conducted for the water and fire activities.
Yeah.
But that there be the delegation of authority granted to the BCOB committee for those.
If that's legally be done, and then maybe at a later date, we will see, you know, some logic in putting the two committees together, maybe not. So I can understand.
But this first step is what the committee would be interested in.
Okay.
That delegation.
Yeah,
Okay.
and just to reiterate that, the only then step where we would then, or not the only, but likely in the most likely situations that we'd be going to the board is in those situations where we need to have a bylaw adopted. So for changing fees and charges or other matters that require a bylaw, of course, that has to be done at the board table.
Yeah.
But all kind of administration and operation of the fire and water service, when you pass a resolution here, it's done, it's resolved, and we can move forward.
Director Rice.
Yeah, so I would move that recommendation.
Well, we'll vote on receipt first.
Okay.
So we're finished. Nothing else on receipt. So let's call a question on receipt. All in favor? And that carries. And I think we got a very, 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 very succinct and simple motion here. Director Rice, you want to move that?
Move that recommendation. Thank you.
I'll second it because there's only two of us. Every decision at this board has to be unanimous. You know that. A tie doesn't cut it in local government. Okay, so we moved the motion and that'll get the wheels spinning regarding the BCOB. And I'm quite comfortable with keeping it as a separate entity at the present time because it gives us that precious access to staff that we crave. Any others? Okay, so on the motion, all in favor? And that carries. Now we have no new business. I guess that was new business, but not really what spoke to the items. So addendum, no media questions. Is there actually anybody working in media anymore? I thought they laid off another 10,000 somewhere. Media questions in camera. Move to terminate. Second. Then we are terminated. Geez, I missed that gavel.